This video lecture has been produced using artificial intelligence with the supervision of Belhaven faculty and staff. Welcome, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to dive into one of the most significant challenges that you'll likely face as a leader. How do you maintain your ethical faithfulness as a venture starts to grow? We're going to look at the unique pressures that scaling creates and explore a biblical framework for navigating all that complexity, really centering on the ideas of stewardship and wisdom. You see, our main question isn't if an organization should grow, but how it can grow in a way that truly honors its purpose and its people. This is such a critical conversation for us to engage with. So let's start right at the core of the problem. As a venture scales, its ethical complexity doesn't just grow, it really intensifies. I mean, think about it for a second. Growth multiplies the consequences of every single decision you make. It naturally puts more distance between you, the leader, and the real-world outcomes of those choices. It brings a whole host of pressures that were either non-existent or at least much more manageable before. We're not just talking about a simple increase in difficulty here. We're talking about a fundamental shift in the entire ethical game itself. This slide does a great job of illustrating a key concept that we call ethical distance. You know, in an early stage venture, you have that direct oversight. You probably know your employees by name. You see the immediate impact of your decisions, and accountability is very personal and relational. But as you scale, layers of management, new systems, and just sheer physical distance start to creep in. And suddenly, your decisions are affecting people you might never even meet. The consequences can become abstract numbers on a spreadsheet. And that separation is so dangerous because it can really dull your moral senses if you're not intentionally pushing back against it. Well, Scripture offers a really powerful counter-narrative to this temptation of feeling less responsible. This quote frames the issue just perfectly. The biblical call to stewardship insists that having more authority doesn't shrink our responsibility, it actually enlarges it. Just think of Jesus' parable of the talents back in Matthew 25. In that story, growth is actually presented as a test of faithfulness. The servants who are entrusted with more are judged by how responsibly they use what's been given to them, not just by the final return on investment. It's a profound reframing of what true success looks like in God's kingdom. So this idea of enlarged responsibility, it naturally leads us to a crucial question. If scaling creates such unique pressures, are our conventional rules-based ethical frameworks really going to be enough? Well, the short answer is no. They often prove to be insufficient. We have to dig a bit deeper for a more durable foundation, and let's explore why that is so important. Here you can really see the contrast between two very different ways of thinking. On the one hand, you've got compliance ethics. It's all about external rules, incentives, penalties. Its main goal is to avoid doing the wrong thing. And look, that's necessary, of course it is. But it's just not enough, especially when your venture is growing so fast that technology and the market are constantly outpacing your policy manual. The biblical model, on the other hand, it goes deeper. It's about forming your internal character. It's about cultivating judgment, wisdom, and discernment. This is a fundamentally different approach to the work of ethics. So here's the bottom line. We're not just trying to train leaders to follow a rule book. We are trying to cultivate leaders who can exercise faithful judgment in those gray areas, especially when there are no clear, easy answers. Because that is where your character is truly put to the test. And that's exactly where a rules-only approach tends to fail. Preparing you for those moments is the real work of ethical formation. All right, now let's turn our attention to the central ethical lens for our whole discussion, the concept of stewardship. This biblical idea provides a really robust foundation for leadership, especially under the pressures of growth. Understanding this concept is absolutely key to our entire framework. Stewardship, in its biblical sense, is simply the recognition that everything a leader manages, the resources, the people, the opportunities, it all ultimately belongs to God. These things are entrusted to us temporarily as caretakers. This simple but incredibly profound idea completely reframes a leader's relationship to power, to profit, and to purpose. It shifts your posture from one of ownership to one of faithful caretaking, and that one shift changes everything about how decisions get. And right here, we can see the practical implications of this mindset. A stewardship perspective pushes back hard against a growth-at-all-costs mentality. It makes you ask the tough questions, like, does this expansion actually align with our God-given purpose? It forces you to prioritize long-term faithfulness over those tempting short-term gains. And it constantly reminds you that you are accountable to an authority much higher than your board of directors or your shareholders. This is such a powerful anchor when you're navigating the turbulent waters of a scaling venture. Accountability, then, flows directly out of stewardship. And it's so important for us to understand that in a biblical sense, this is much more than just external reporting. It requires leaders to remain personally answerable for their actions and their intentions. So often in large organizations, there's this temptation to hide behind complex systems or market logic. Biblical ethics just refuses this kind of deflection and insists that our moral agency remains intact, even within the most complex systems. This kind of personal responsibility just cannot be delegated away. So if stewardship is the what, the foundational principle, then wisdom is the how. It's how we actually apply stewardship in the messy reality of the world we live in. Let's turn to the crucial disciplines of wisdom and discernment that are so essential for any ethical leader. In Scripture, wisdom isn't simply about being intelligent or having a lot of experience. It's defined here as a skill, the practical skill of aligning our decisions with God's purposes amidst all the complexities of real-world conditions. The biblical texts, especially the book of Proverbs, consistently associate this skill with foresight, with humility, and with a teachable spirit. This is exactly the kind of practical virtue a leader needs when navigating the challenges of growth. Jesus' teaching in Luke 14 about counting the cost before you build a tower, well, it serves as an excellent model for wise leadership. It's fundamentally about proactive, ethical planning. First, we have to anticipate risk. We have to think ahead to identify potential challenges before they become full-blown crises. Second, we have to recognize our limits with genuine humility. And third, we must consciously resist expediency, choosing the path of faithfulness over those tempting shortcuts that success often seems to justify. This provides a very practical framework for making wise decisions. Now, discernment becomes especially critical when leaders are facing decisions that involve competing goods, where every available option carries some sort of cost. Romans 12 speaks to this directly, suggesting that true ethical discernment flows from minds that are being renewed and shaped by God's truth. This kind of transformation allows leaders to resist conforming to cultural pressures, like that pervasive norm that equates sheer scale with ultimate significance. A renewed mind can evaluate decisions based on much deeper values, which is an absolutely essential capacity for Christian leadership. As we start to synthesize these themes, we arrive at a really powerful conclusion. The challenge of scaling a venture is not merely a technical or a business problem. At its very core, it is a deeply spiritual and formative test of a leader's character. And this is where the real work truly begins. And so this brings us to the core reflection question for our unit, and I want to pose it directly to you now. As you consider your own leadership journey, which ethical risk do you believe is the hardest to manage at scale? Taking a moment for some honest self-examination right here is absolutely crucial for your development as a leader. The source material we're working with highlights several common vulnerabilities. For some of us, the greatest risk is moral drift, that slow accumulation of small compromises that, over time, can completely change a leader's direction. For others, it might be power asymmetry, where they become so insulated from the consequences of their choices that they start to lose empathy. And for many, the struggle is with impatience, allowing that sense of urgency to override the need for careful discernment. Knowing where you are most susceptible is really the first step toward leading faithfully. Ultimately, this gets to the very heart of the matter. The process of growth is a kind of crucible. It exposes what we as leaders truly value. It relentlessly reveals whether success has become an idol that we serve or whether it remains a means by which we serve others and honor God. When an organization is scaling, there is simply nowhere to hide from that reality. It truly clarifies our ultimate commitments. And so we'll conclude with this powerful reframing statement. It is so tempting to view ethics and stewardship as constraints on growth, as brakes on progress. But a biblical framework invites us to see them instead as the very conditions necessary for growth that is healthy, sustainable, and truly meaningful. They aren't the things that hold us back. They are the very foundation upon which enduring ventures are built. And that is the perspective we are called to embrace as faithful leaders.